Hey friend, in this video I'll finally be showing you how I set up my Daniel Smith watercolor palette. I'll go through the colors that I chose, why I chose them, and then I'll swatch them out and also give you some tips. I'll leave timestamps for you and I'll link everything that I use in the description. But if you're doing the same or similar, you'll need the paints that you're going to use. I'll use my Daniel Smith, your watercolor palette. And for me, this is a palette that I got from Amazon that again, I'll link down below. It's a 12 pan set, but in theory, I can fit 20 half pans in there. You'll also need your half pans, and mine actually came with the palette and also came with sticky magnets at the bottom, which is really helpful. I also like to create a little swatch card for my palettes just so that I can keep track of the colors. So for this you'll need some watercolor paper as well as a waterproof pen. I'm going to use my Unipen fine liners and then a watercolor brush, and I'm using the size 12 Princeton Aqua Elite brush. So if you've seen my cast out haul, then you saw when I bought these watercolor paints and I was so excited about them. I still am, but obviously I felt a bit too precious about them. I felt that I couldn't quite use them yet, and so my plan was not actually to create this video this week, but it happened by accident. And so I decided to go with it. If you've seen my Jackson's haul, then you've seen that I recently bought some Daniel Smith watercolor dot cards, and my plan was to swatch them out and then give you a good idea as to whether they are worth investing in or whether you should just save your money and avoid them. And as part of that video, I was going to swatch my Daniel Smith colors from the tube and compare them to the dot cards to just see how accurate the colors are. For some reason that I do not know, and please feel free to let me know if you know why, this happened. Let's see. Oh no. Well, that's not good. Thankfully, I have a random collection of empty half pans on my desk ready to go, so I was able to salvage the paint, and from there inspiration struck and led to this video. So currently my go-to method of creating a watercolor palette is basically having a split primary palette plus additional colors that are either harder to mix or that I tend to use quite often, or that I use to make beautiful mixes with. So what I mean by split primary is that essentially I want to have a warm and a cool version of each of the primary colours, so that's yellow, blue and red. And the reason that I want to do that is because it will afford me and you, I guess, the opportunity to like mix more colours and also perhaps, experiment with limited palettes. So the first colour was New Gamboge. It is a mixture of PY97 and PY110 of excellent light fastness, which means it shouldn't fade, low staining, non-granulating and transparent. This is essentially my go-to warm yellow in this set. It is one of my favourite colours in my Winsor & Newton set, or at least the equivalent is, and thus I knew that I had to get it for this. I use it for my landscapes, my florals, mixing everything. Next to the palette is Hansa Yellow Light, and this is my core yellow, if you like. It's pigment PY3, which in other brands is quite often called like lemon yellow. It's got very good light fast rating, which is one step below excellent. It is low staining, non-granulating and semi-transparent. This is a cool yellow, which means that it leans more towards making really nice and vibrant greens. And as I love painting botanical paintings and doing loose florals, it just has to be a staple in my palette. So that's why I added that there. The Daniel Smith colours that I have are 5mm tubes, and they also come in larger sizes, I think 15mm tubes. And the half pans, which are standard half pan sizes, tend to take up to 2 mils of paint. So usually what I do is add the paint in, mix it with a cocktail stick to get rid of any bubbles, and then I leave it for 24 hours. By that time it's dried, and quite often you'll find that the paint has kind of sunk, and then I add some more paint to just get it nice and full to the top, especially if it's a colour that I know I'm going to be using quite a lot. If it's a colour that I'm not sure of, then I don't have to be as extra and fill it twice. One pour will do. Next is a little bit more of a, I guess, a convenience colour, because really and truly I could mix this myself, but I just love Sap Green. Like, I just really like using it. I use it so often. I've finished it already in my Winsor & Newton palette twice, so I just felt it was worth getting a colour that I knew I was going to use often, even if it is a colour that I could mix myself. The Daniel Smith Sap Green is made of 3 pigments, which are P048, PY150 and PG7. It is of excellent light fastness, moderately staining, granulating and transparent. I usually tend to avoid granulating paints, but I wanted to try something different, and to be perfectly honest, I was more drawn by the color rather than whether it granulated or not. So because I like the color so much, I was willing to ignore the fact that it may or may not granulate. The only other thing to bear in mind is that usually it's better to mix colors that have fewer pigments in them, because in theory the more pigments you add, the easier it is to kind of create muddy colors. So this is probably a color that I would only add one color to, or a few colors, and that I am aware could quite easily become muddy, but again, it's just a risk worth taking. Like, I really do like the color. Then one of my staple colors that I absolutely love, and that is Paynes Gray. So this Paynes Gray is made of two pigments, which are PB29 and PBK9. Looking at it, it is moderately staining, granulating and semi-transparent. Again, granulating, but I don't mind. It just creates such beautiful colors when mixed, especially for botanicals. I know that off the bat you don't think that you'd make them really dark, but you can get some really nice greens by mixing them in. I use it for shadows. It's just, yeah, it's one of my favorite colors by far. As I mentioned, this one is granulating, but not excessively so. And the only slight difference is that it looks like it has a bit of a blue tinge, certainly more than my other colors, but again, still just as beautiful and is of excellent light fast quality. If you're enjoying this video so far, then don't forget to hit the subscribe button and to also hit the like button. I'm quite a new channel and it makes such a massive difference, not only to me but also to my channel. And then if you're still watching, then you are a real MVP. I really appreciate you. Let me know that you are watching by telling me what your favorite colors are to use in whatever medium you love to use as well. Now let's continue. Next, I have my cool blue, which is called Phthalo blue, and to be perfectly honest, I've been saying that wrong in my head all this time, but the PH is silent. So Phthalo blue green shade, it is PB15-3, excellent light fastness, medium staining, non-granulating and opaque, and this is just such a vibrant, punchy blue, which again makes really nice greens, hence why I picked it. The only thing to also mention is that it is really punchy, really bright, so if that's what you like, you'll love it. But if you want something a bit more understated, then you're either going to have to really water it down or just pick a different blue. But yeah, that's why I picked it, because again, I like bright colors. Next, I chose Ultramarine, and this is PB29. It is again of excellent light fastness. It is medium staining, granulating and transparent. This is my warm blue, which again I can use to make really nice dark purples. It is a lot more granulating than the other colors, and I think if perhaps I had known that, I would have probably got a different color, again another warm blue. If you love granulating colors, then go for it. If they're not for you, then just be mindful of that when you're looking to make your palette. Next, I got Pyroll Scarlet. Looks quite orangey when you look at it. It's made of PR255, excellent light fastness. It's moderately staining, non-granulating and semi-transparent. And again, can just lean itself to making really nice peach colors, really nice oranges as well. So I'm just, yeah, especially, you can tell that I love florals basically. That's why I am adding it. And also for mixing, I think I can get some really nice colors out of it. Next, I got Burnt Sienna. The reason that I got Burnt Sienna is primarily because I love painting landscapes and I also want to try and paint more portraits, and Burnt Sienna is just a staple for doing both of those things and doing them well. It's also like a really nice neutral color to have. It's nice to mix with. It is PBR7. It's excellent light fastness. It's non-staining, granulating and semi-transparent. Same kind of thing to mention again with the granulation. So I think if you want to use it for landscapes, it will work really nicely. It will add texture and interest. For portraits, may not be the effect that I'm looking for. So for that reason, I will probably end up getting another neutral color to just add to this palette, or create a separate portrait palette with no granulating colors. A random tip, if you experience this same kind of like exploding paint tube kind of scenario, is to have a clean brush to hand that you just damp with water. Use it to wipe off the excess from the top and wipe off the excess from the lid, and then add it to your half pan. That way you're not wasting any paint, and it also reduces the mess to a certain extent. Then Next, what I have is, and I'm going to say this so wrong, but I just love this color. And this is Quinacridone Rose. It is PV19, excellent light fastness, medium staining, non-granulating and transparent. And of all the colors, this is my favorite. And I've added it kind of as like red, even though looking at it, it is kind of a pinkish color, hence the name Rose, but it's just such a nice color. It almost reminds me of, you know, the permanent rose in my Winsor & Newton that I keep finishing and keep using. It's so bright and vibrant, and yet it's also transparent, and yet it also leans itself to mixing, and using it on its own can also be used to make beautiful colors. So yeah, it just had to be, again, part of my palette. And I'm so glad I got it. Like I said, of all the colors, this is definitely my favorite. If I omit putting in a paintbrush, then I can actually get 20 half pans inside this tiny set, which I think is perfect, especially as I want to travel. So if you have any color suggestions from Daniel Smith or other brands, then please let me know down below in the comments so that I can check them out and add to this, I guess, professional palette. And then last but certainly least, and that's not me misspeaking, this is like the worst color, is Cobalt Violet. So I don't know what happened here, but if you're listening to this and you're considering getting this color, I would strongly advise you to think twice, to pay attention, and to see if this is the effect that you want, because I cannot explain why, but it just was not laying flat at all. The color itself, when it comes out, looks so beautiful, like such a nice rich purple, and you know that I love purples. It took me a while to realize, but I realized that now. So I just thought that, oh yes, I would be able to add like a Paynes Gray and get some really nice dark purples, and I was kind of being lazy, treating myself, and that's why I got this color. But boy, was it disappointing. So in part, okay, yes, it's granulating, but that's not the issue with it. It's just, I don't know if the paint is broken, if it's expired. Like, I can't explain what's going on with the paint. I initially tried to mix it with a cocktail stick to see if that was what was wrong, if perhaps the binder had like separated, but it feels like you're trying to paint with PVA glue. That's what it feels like, with slightly stained off pink PVA glue. Now, no one should sue me. I'm just saying, I don't know if this is what it's meant to be like, but yeah, I tried swatching it small, large, it just was not working. So yes, so that's why this palette has 9 colors instead. That's why this palette has 9 colors instead of 10. A few quick tips just for the maintenance of the palette itself. The ring at the back is just so that you can put your hand in when you're plein air painting, for example, so it doesn't fall out. The set that I had, the middle actually comes out, so I actually added some sticky dots to the bottom so that it doesn't all fall out because the magnets weren't quite strong enough to hold it in, especially when all the paints are inside. To stick in the half pans, you can either use these sticky magnets, for example, which you can get from Amazon for like £5 for 100, or you can use glue dots that you can get from Poundland for £1, but they may not last as long. As the only thing to be aware of. Once you've filled up your palette and it's all dry, you can then also consider writing with a Sharpie or some sort of permanent marker or a label what the paint actually is inside the pans. For example, with my blues, I kept getting them confused before labeling them, so I kept having to swatch and re-swatch just to be extra sure that I was putting them in the right place. So that's just something to be aware of. You may remember now, but for example, if you put it down for a month and you come back, will you remember again what the colors are, what the brand is, etc., etc.? So that's worth doing as well. And last but not least, to also help with this problem, is a little swatch card. So I like doing this for each one of my palettes because it helps me keep track of what paints I have. A small piece of watercolor paper that can fit inside the palette, and I'll either add some PVA glue at the end, or more than likely I'll probably just laminate it so that I can have it inside the palette and not have it get reactivated by the water or the paints that are inside. Bar the paints exploding out of the tubes and whatever happened with Cobalt Violet, the paints were actually so nice. I know it's just swatches, but in terms of first impression, it just feels like really creamy, if that makes sense. It glides so nicely. I did some small paintings and I was still able to see like the line work. Amazing, like literally amazing. I'm still new to it, I still need to experiment, but first impressions are really good. In terms of advice, if you are getting Daniel Smith, they have a good reputation. Obviously, just bear in mind things like light fastness and the qualities that you want. So, do you like lifting, in which case you want to avoid something that's staining? Do you like granulation, or would you rather avoid it? Do you like adding on like lots of nice layers on top, in which case you want like more transparent watercolors? Or would you prefer like painting in single layers and you want like really vibrant and punchy watercolors, in which case you want like opaque ones? So these are all the things to consider. This is just a snippet looking at 10 out of over 250 colours by Daniel Smith. If you want to see 238 of them, then check out the other videos that I have where I'll basically swatch them, talk about their qualities, and help you pick the best colours for your palette and minimize wasting money. I hope you enjoyed the video and I will see you next week. Bye. Here are the bloopers. Essentially, half of the colours exploded out of their tubes as soon as I opened them. So there's something about paying £6.50, £6.60 per tiny tube of paint that will make you do crazy things to make sure that you collect every single drop of watercolour that you can. And that is exactly what I did. So I never thought I was clumsy. I can't explain what happened here, but I thought that you would enjoy watching the struggle. See you next week. Bye.